Okay. Okay. Good morning and welcome to Pro Landscaper TV. I hope everyone is well and keeping safe. Pro Landscaper TV will air every Tuesday at 10 AM and each programme should last around about half an hour. The programmes will go live via the Zoom link, Facebook Live and Instagram Live. But the best thing of all is that it's all being recorded and you will be able to catch up either via the Pro Landscaper website or the Pro Landscaper YouTube channel. We have an array of different programmes lined up. We have one-to-ones with some of the industry key players talking about the topics of the day. We look inside some of the most successful companies or look at some of the most successful projects or even successful launches. We have a debate which might range from topics about designers, RHS Chelsea show, porcelain, recycled products, and there we'll have an industry panel that will debate those issues. We're also going to be talking to some of the suppliers of the industry. And then we have our nurture programme, which will cover all aspects of soft landscaping. The schedule of the programmes will be available on the Pro Landscaper website, which will also include how you can join up and how you can also get involved. So on to this morning, and let's hear it from. I'm delighted to be joined by Lewis Norman. Looking at Lewis's bio, a garden designer, a plantsman, a writer, which of course includes his fantastic monthly column he does in Pro Landscaper magazine, and a horticultural sales manager. Lewis has had a really eventful few months. He's just moved his family back from Kent to Scotland, and I guess coping with the wind and the rain and the snow doing that. Well done, Lewis.
It's lovely, how dare you.
Chairing some of the seminars at Futurescape Virtual, which were some of the best attended and some fantastic content came through it, and also launching his campaign for the UK to introduce a Minister of Horticulture. So morning, Lewis. Thank you very much for joining us today. Hope you're well. Hope you're settled.
Yeah. It's great to be here and yeah, to be your first sort of introductory Let's Hear It From. I'm looking forward to doing some of the Nurture TV stuff with you later on as well. But yeah, no, it's brilliant. Yeah, it's been a busy couple of months with a big move, 500-mile move. But we're settling in. This is a temporary house while we find a house to buy, so we're settling into a point. And how dare you with the weather? It's been fabulous since we got. We have had snow, and we had a little bit last night as well. But it makes for a winter wonderland.
Yeah, very much so. I guess if we just sort of Lewis, a little bit of, there's a lot that you're involved in, a lot that you do.
Yeah.
What's the history of you then? How did you get into horticulture? When did you start?
So really, I at school, I always thought I was going to be a scientist. That was my approach, a physicist. And I was headed for a degree in laser engineering and optoelectronics. And I've been accepted to that. And I had a moment where I couldn't see myself in a white lab coat for the rest of my career. And at the same time, I had been gardening for people and working in a local garden centre and, really building an interest, if not a great knowledge at that point, in plants and gardens. And so over time, I built more of an interest in gardens and garden design. Looked at my options, and back in the day, you used to look at CFAX to see what you were going to do for clearing. And I found a degree in garden design at Hadlow College, University of Greenwich. And so I went and did a portfolio course in graphic design and illustration at a local college in Scotland. And the following year, went on to start my degree. During my degree, I set up my own business, designing gardens, and I designed in the UK, a bit in Europe and in the Middle East. And I started working at Cooling's Nurseries, a brilliant retail nursery, and I learned a phenomenal amount there. I think the thing is, I'm speaking to people who love horticulture. So they all know you fall in love at some point and it just becomes more and more expansive. And really that's all it is for me. The contact with plants is my kind of biggest interest. And although I have a degree in garden design, plants are my greatest focus within that. So I kind of got in there slightly strange route, but it's the same as everyone else. they found something they loved and just bit on it and just kept going, you know. Yeah, and so now I do a variety of things. You could say it's because I get bored easily. You could say it's because I'm interested in a variety of things. I don't know. My wife's forever complaining that I'm a collector of everything. So I think it's that I'm just, you know, I find a lot of things about the world fascinating. And so, in fact, you can see one of my most recent collections there. I've started collecting amaryllis or hippeastrum bulbs, and there's, you know, quite a few of those around the house in various states of flower or bud. Yeah, so horticulture, I taught it at Hadlow College, I taught it at the University of Greenwich, and I taught garden design there as well. And then I went back into the nursery trade in 2011 and moved to my most recent position with Bernard's Nurseries, who are based in Rugby in Warwickshire, in 2017. And that really was probably the moment where I started to do more writing, which was what I've been very interested in for a long time. And I think with the writing, particularly the stuff for Pro Landscaper, because it's very focused on the industry rather than the stuff I do for the retail market, it focuses your attention on some issues that you want to discuss, to raise. And so that's where, after a year or so of mulling over, thinking, God, wouldn't it be good if somebody actually was really representing horticulture and didn't have lots of other things to think about? That's where really this idea came for the Minister of Horticulture.
So I guess, you know, first of all, well done, congratulations for standing up and putting your head above the parapet to do it. I guess there are a few questions that are going in my mind, some positive, some maybe just sort of trying to get a better understanding. I guess the biggest one I have is in terms of, is horticulture the right term, and does that narrow what it should be? And then I guess the counter argument of that, is it too big, horticulture, just to have one person? And I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. What would this role entail in your mind? What would you, if someone said to you, okay, fine, write a job description for it, what would you say?
Right, well, it's a really interesting point, that, because you're right. I mean, here's the reason why I've had any negative response. I've had very little negative response to this, but the response that I have had, which has been negative, has been, God, we don't need any more MPs, you know, or any more ministers for. But my argument here is that DEFRA, which effectively are the ministry representing horticulture, they don't mention horticulture at all on their pages on the website. They mention landscape once, maybe twice. They don't represent the retail or the wholesale side in any of their communication. So although we've got people like George Eustace as the DEFRA minister, and we've got representation in Parliament through that, I would argue that focusing on agriculture alone, particularly at the moment where we've got huge, you know, repercussions from Brexit and our ability to import and export, and that's especially notable with fisheries right now. You know, literally this last week, where we're talking about businesses potentially dying because they can't export any seafood into Europe. I would say we need to recognise that horticulture isn't really being heard. It can't necessarily be heard when you've got so much to do with agriculture and fisheries, which are, at the end of the day, feed us. And although there are elements of horticulture which feed us, most of what we consider, you know, food is agriculture, you know, within sort of, yeah. It's generally based on the size of the market or the size of the producer. So I would say that horticulture doesn't get heard within the DEFRA remit. We get looked at and assessed very rigorously in terms of import and export for plant health and biosecurity, which is great. But, you know, ask yourself this: do you feel that horticulture is well represented at, you know, in the government? Do you feel they understand what horticulture is about? You know, my argument would be no.
Yeah. And I guess just on that, so what issues over the last year would you have wanted to hear more about, or have the government or the ministers talking more about in horticulture? What isn't being heard?
Well, I mean, obviously we've got two major things. We've got COVID and we've got Brexit, so they're impacting on what's happening at the moment. And in terms of Brexit, which is the one that's arguably had the most, we found out what was going to happen with plant import moments before the rules changed. You know, in December, they were coming up with new ideas on how they were going to do it. Now, we can argue, yeah, you didn't have a deal until later, or you did have a deal, but you could have planned for both. You could have said, this is how we're going to do it. In the event of a deal, this is exactly what's going to happen. And in the event of no deal, this is exactly what's going to happen. But that wasn't clear. And we're still experiencing now, speaking with DEFRA, when we're trying to look at plant import, changes being imposed. Some of them in the EU side and some of them in the UK side. But although we have someone to speak to, you know, we can phone up DEFRA and speak to them, there's nobody challenging any decisions. If you look at workers, foreign workers, European workers coming in, they were talking about agriculture, but they didn't talk about the horticulture market. So it was completely missed. We've had, in the last month, an import ban on all prunus, which was a knee-jerk reaction to a very specific group of prunus that should have been banned from very particular regions because of problems, but we banned them all. And then we had to knee-jerk back again in the opposite direction and allow the import of certain prunus. I just feel that coordinated efforts have not been made. There are lots of little examples, but there's the greater issue of long-term. Do people understand what horticulture means? Do they know what landscape entails? Do they understand garden designers? Do they understand florists? Do they understand people that work in forestry? You know, I don't feel that we're well represented in terms of the public knowledge, and a lot of that extends to people in government not understanding that. You know, we've previously had David Cameron talking about gardeners, professional gardeners, and people in horticulture being likened to, you know, litter picking.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago, but nothing's really changed.
And there's a couple of things to listen to that, Lewis. First of all, the idea of a minister, I remember when in the construction industry that they were talking about getting a minister for construction. And there's something I read recently. There's been 8 people that have held that post since 2016. And what weight can that person have who's only going to be in a job for 3 months? I think the last one was in there for less than a month.
Yeah.
So even by having a minister, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's all well and good, but as an industry, then, as horticulture as an industry, do you think we know what we want, how it should be represented? Do you think we're talking as one? And I guess because that minister will get different views and different things from different people, like they do in the construction sector.
Yeah, I think that we have some good professional bodies who can lobby and sort of direct attention to certain issues. I'm sure of that, in fact. We have some great people working for them. But I feel that some of it falls on deaf ears out of necessity. If you've got one industry like agriculture worth 120 billion a year, and horticulture at 24 billion, you know, you're going to get a lower percentage of the attention. Fisheries, in our Brexit agreement, fisheries was one of the sticking points, you'll recall. Less than £1 billion a year, you know, 1.4 at its greatest. And yet I don't remember horticulture being mentioned at all in the discussions for a, you know, £24 billion industry. I don't know that having a minister is a guarantee to success, but I do know that it's a guarantee to some attention some of the time, a voice in Parliament. You know, it maybe doesn't have to be an actual minister in themselves. It could just be one MP that really wants to take up the challenge and represent. And I don't have any objection to that. I just think that in trying to draw attention to the need for parliamentary interest and attention. That's the more important thing at the moment. I don't, whether this campaign ever changes the way the world works, I don't know. I doubt it, but I want people to think about it. It's just about asking a question. Do you feel well represented? Do you feel that the industry is well understood? And do you feel that we can do better? And I think no, no, and yes.
So in terms of, have you come across the all-party parliamentary group for gardening and horticulture?
Yeah.
And what's your views on that? Again, one thing that struck me when I looked at it, the first thing that they write underneath their branding is no official status within Parliament.
Yeah, so that's always the problem there, isn't it? That you know, it's great to lobby and it's great to get people in a room and have a chat with them and try and encourage them of your position. It doesn't actually leverage anything. And it's not to say that a Minister for Horticulture could leverage anything, but they would have a department, they would have a portfolio which would make some change, that would have ambitions, long-term ambitions, and the standard sort of 5-year parliamentary ambition. And I think that's more than we're looking at currently. There is no agenda for horticulture. There is for tree planting, you know, and which overlaps very comfortably into horticulture, but it's not actually specifically about hort. It's not there to help our industry. You know, we've forever, since I thought about horticulture, been complaining that it's low paid, the industry struggles to get the right people, the right candidates. Well, we can't still be making that mistake now and it being acceptable. Some of it has to be us, and some of it has to be that we just don't get heard nationally.
Yeah. I agree with you, and there's a lot that I guess needs to be done internally, but I think that the idea for a minister, that the only times I sort of come across them, as I say, it feels that they're only there filling in a role until they get the job that they really want, which is always a massive issue. It sometimes is a block because you think you get to the minister and that's fine and it doesn't go any further. And I guess just going back to another point on it at the moment, you know, is horticulture sexy enough? However, if it was started to be linked to the climate and to climate change and things like that, would it become maybe a better job to have in Parliament?
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, the idea of landscape and the environment seamlessly overlap with horticulture. There's no reason why we can't, it doesn't have to be specifically a Minister for Horticulture, but I think horticulture has to be on their agenda. At the moment, we've got DEFRA consistently ignoring anything other than the word landscape, which is pretty ambiguous. You're absolutely right. You know, most MPs, most parliaments think for 5 years because it's the most they're going to really guarantee. And then the next one comes in and we'll do something different. Maybe it's a position that a Lord should have, you know, because they tend to be around for longer and they can form a stronger agenda and argue a point. I don't know. I think it's more important that we understand that we're not being heard very effectively and we're not being allowed to communicate directly to people who can impact on our future. You know, if you've got a round table group who have essentially no guarantees of success, while they're important because they are going to be arguing our case, nothing need come of it. And it doesn't mean that it will ever be heard. It doesn't mean that there'll ever be any bill put in place for a particular motion. You know, we have opportunities to drive change, and I think it's important that we try to do that. And if that just becomes an acknowledgement of the word horticulture on the DEFRA website, well, it's a small win, but it is a win at least. I think there are lots of things we can do over the future, and it's more important that everybody feels sufficiently militant and frustrated, that rather than just accept that, oh, we're not going to be heard, or we're going to be misunderstood, we're going to be banded in with agriculture, or we're all going to be litter pickers, we actually just say something and say, no, actually, I believe that our message is more important. We have a lot of representation in bodies like the HTA, GCA, Bali, APL, Institute of Horticulture, etc., etc. Society of Garden Designers, Floristry have a number of different associations, and these associations are all, you know, in those lobbying groups, and they're all trying to make their message heard. That's great, but if no ministers turn up, or if they decide all of a sudden that, you know, fisheries or waterways or any other of the many elements that DEFRA has to take care of are more important, then they're definitely going to get the attention, because we just tick along, and we've never been a problem in the past, so we're not likely to be a problem in the future.
Lewis, listen to what you're saying. I don't think anyone's arguing that we need to do it, but I guess when I just picked up on something you said there, when you listen to the different organisations that come under the horticultural banner,
yeah.
isn't that one of the issues? And you know, have you had a conversation? Nice mug, by the way. Have you had a conversation with any of the associations about your about what you're trying to do?
I've very deliberately not done that, because I felt that if they wanted to, they're welcome to do it, but I'm not going to try canvassing them, because I would rather speak to the individuals working within the industry. You know, we're talking about over 300,000 people directly employed and nearly 600,000 indirectly employed by horticulture. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of mouths to feed, you know, and it's a big industry. We contribute something like, in 2018, it was about 4 billion to the Chancellor to spend on other things. I don't remember a great deal of it getting invested back into horticulture. So I think, you know, there's a lot we have to offer, and we have some good professional bodies representing people. You can argue that you just want one, but I think actually, again, that kind of devalues all the different elements of the industry. As long as they come together and they can work together as a team on one mission, then it's worth it. But what I focused on is speaking to the individual, because I think we all play a part in representation, and not all of us are represented by a professional body, because most of them require membership. So there are lots of individuals out there gardening, perhaps one-man bands. There are florists working for themselves. There are tree surgeons who are maybe one or two guys, you know, grafting away. They may not be members of or herd members of a professional body. They may be represented, but they're unlikely to be very well heard within it, because there will be big companies that can shout louder and get better representation. I'd like to think that I can speak directly to them and try and mobilize them to have an opinion, to try and voice their opinion, maybe to sign the campaign petition, but also just to think about, you know, you deserve better, you really do. And if other companies, larger companies and organizations that represent those companies want to sign and want to commit to it, then great, happy days. But I'm not going to go out canvassing them, because they've got their own agendas and they want to do that, and I understand that, and I'm fine with that. They represent their bodies, but we'll see if they want to stand up and be heard separately.
And I guess the associations are the ones that are funding any of the lobbying that we are doing at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is that. So in terms of the minister, how would you literally see the role working? How would we communicate as an industry to them, and how would it all get fed back?
Well, essentially, it'll be the same thing. That we'll still have round tables, we'll still have discussion groups, but we'll be able to petition directly to a minister whose interest is not exclusively on the biggest problem they have within a huge remit, but they have a smaller remit. So it could be an under minister within DEFRA. That's fine, that makes sense, but just one that says the word horticulture and therefore actually has attention towards that. You know, we've got, I think there are 4 ministers and lords effectively representing DEFRA. Massive thing, DEFRA, and hugely important, and the agenda is headed entirely in the favor of holistic well-being, landscape, outdoor spaces, tree planting, carbon zero, you know, all of these things. everything we're headed towards as a society, and as well as food production and biosecurity, are all underneath the DEFRA remit. So we would have a representative whose focus was on that, who could actually speak out in Parliament. They may very well be involved in landscape construction. They may very well be involved in one of the other DEFRA or several other of the DEFRA remits, which also include international environmental implications. So, you know, it's a big, big department. And I think it's just about being heard by someone who has our interests on their agenda. And if DEFRA can't currently represent horticulture, even in name, then they're definitely not going to be doing it in reality.
And so what's the next steps? What's your plan to continue?
Oh,
And where do you
I'd
need
love to
get
say it was as well thought out as that, Jim. I would like to see DEFRA represent horticulture in name at least, and ideally in an individual who's going to actually, you know, take over the handle. And I'm going to write to them directly to address this. But I think really it's most important that everybody who's interested, everyone who supports this cause, wants, you know, the idea of horticulture being better represented and better understood, that they encourage signing of the campaign petition that I put up, because at the very least, it's a beginning to acknowledge that a representation within horticulture feel we need to be better looked after. So I'm going to definitely communicate with them, and I'm going to keep pushing for people to sign. And I hope that that nurseries, that individual businesses, garden designers can actually stand behind it and put their name on it, and then go out and represent. Nick Coslet there saying local authority, green space. Yeah, absolutely, communities. Yeah. So we've got a lot of need, but we need more people to actually get involved.
And so so you're asking people to go and sign. How do they sign? Where do they find it?
It's on change.org, and you'll find it if you go onto my Instagram, my Plantsman. You can find it in my bio. You can find it on change.org. You'll find it scattered over my Twitter. And what I'd like is for as many businesses as well as individuals to really try and push it. Yeah, we've got, someone's just put the link in the actual body of our chat there. But yeah, the more the merrier. It's appeared in Pro Landscaper, and it's appeared on the website. So you can also go on to Pro Landscaper website and click on the link there to sign. You know, we're a modest 815 signatures at the moment. I don't know that there's an amount that's going to make a difference, but I do know that that every one of those 815 signatures is someone who's dissatisfied with the attention that they're getting. And you know, I think that's probably a small representation. So
have you got a number in mind though?
You know, I don't. Actually, I don't. I think 1,000's a nice start, isn't it? But then if we've got 1 in every 62 jobs representing horticulture in the UK, then you know, there's quite a few people out there who could be signing it. So let's say 500,000. Being totally realistic. If we get to 1,000, then I would consider that a success story. But you know, it really, the more important bit is that we actually get heard, and we think about ourselves as people who can be heard and can be represented. Because I think that's one of our biggest problems, is that we go to work day to day. We're not expecting much from government. We often find that we're forgotten about, and we just take it when we get screwed over or ignored. And it's more important whether I get another signature on it or not. It's more important that people feel that they can be represented and that they have a voice and that they don't accept second best.
Yeah, and I go back to it. Well done for putting your name forward and pushing it. I think again, it's a big ask to get it, but if we can get some kind of conversation and communication going,
Yeah,
and I guess, you know, if the associations get behind it and push it, and presumably you talk to the suppliers as well who, you know, need the horticulture section to grow for
yeah,
their businesses.
absolutely. Like I said, I'm talking to everybody who wants to hear it, but if they're not interested, that's fine. I'm not trying to force an agenda on anyone. I'm just trying to say, look, do you feel well represented? Do you feel heard? And if you don't, then you have a voice and you should try and force it.
Good on you on that. I said half an hour. There's a couple of quick questions that I'd quite like to ask, and away from this. So we'll do a follow up. There are lots of questions, and we will try and do something on the Pro Landscaper website, which maybe answer some of those questions and capture what we discussed.
Yeah,
but I've just got a couple of quick things. So you're not a great fan of Monty Don then?
That's hugely provocational. My relationship with Monty Don, I find that he doesn't well represent the industry. I think he's great for the public interest in gardening. You can't question that at all, but he doesn't connect with the industry at all. And as a consequence, he often finds himself jarring with where we're headed. I don't mind him provoking discussion on peat use and things like that. I think that's great. But I do think that it's unfortunate that he won't talk to anyone in the industry and therefore doesn't understand anything about it in any real sense. So personally, I mean, I've met him a couple of times, but I don't know him. I don't have anything personal against him, but I just think that it's such a shame that someone who is effectively the person that everyone recognizes in the UK as gardens, aka horticulture, he has such a disconnect with the marketplace and really doesn't understand what we're about. And he said some really unfair and inappropriate things about the professional side of the market over time, which people like Alan Titchmarsh never did. And to my knowledge, Jeff Hamilton never did. So I think, and Toby Buckland is another lead presenter. And then we've got a number of presenters in Gardeners World who actually represent the industry very effectively. Nick Bailey, garden designer. We've got Arrett, another garden designer. Chris Beardshaw, another epic garden designer. And people like Carol Klein, who's connected. There are lots of people in there on TV, in the media, who understand professional horticulture far better. And I think it's a shame that the person who's right at the top of the tree makes no effort.
And so just another quick thing, a lot of the discussions in your seminars at Futurescape Virtual was about the effect of Brexit, because at the time we didn't know deal or no deal. Now a month into it, have you seen any difference, or is there much difference in terms of supply?
It's been difficult. I mean, even this last week, Dutch suppliers were cancelling large portions of orders because it became impossible to move plants from within the EU into Holland to then move it into the UK. Not impossible, but costly, because you had to get a, what's it called, EU pre-export certificate. So plants from Belgium going to Holland, or France or Germany going to Holland and then into the UK, or going, via another country into the UK, cost a lot more money. And so the immediate and kind of logical reaction from Dutch suppliers was to say, that's it, we can only do stuff coming out of Holland now because it's not cost effective and it's a lot more hassle for us to do it. There are costs rising pretty much daily at the moment, and availability is slow and scattered. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, because we're at a quiet period in time. We're in a lockdown, so less plants are being required at the moment. And when we get really busy, certainly DEFRA just before Christmas didn't really have much of a concept of how many plants and trolleys and trucks were coming into the UK. and it's going to be an eye-opener. Obviously, when we've got plants which can't survive being on a trolley or in a truck for 2 days while they're held up at ports, you know, hopefully we get that through more seamlessly. But cost is going to be the biggest thing, coupled with availability, at least for the next sort of 6 months or so. And I think that's one of the big issues that we're definitely encountering, because our costs to import have noticeably gone up, and we're trying to just, you know, make it as seamless and working as possible. But right now, yeah, tricky.
Okay, Lewis, it's always great to talk to you, and again, I think the industry should thank you for what you're trying to do. We will make sure that the link is easy accessible on all of our channels for people to sign up to it. But again, yeah, thank you very much. Next week we have Helen Smith, who is one of, I think, 4 designers that's going to be working on a brand new TV program, which is based on an interior design one. So that'll be quite an interesting conversation. But thank you all for people for listening, and really appreciate that. And again, well done, Lewis. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. You have a great day.
And you, Lewis. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.